Can Jake Paul really defeat Julio Cesar Chavez Jr.? So on June 28th, Jake Paul will be facing Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. in a cruiserweight 10-round bout. Now, honestly, this entire event questions definitely where Jake Paul is at in his boxing career and his boxing ability, because this is an ex-world champion and of course the son of one of the greatest Mexican fighters to ever put on the gloves, Julio Cesar Chavez. So just to answer the question of this video, can Jake Paul really defeat Julio Cesar Chavez Jr.? Well, it's definitely a possibility, especially if you look at how Chavez has been doing in his last few bouts, especially the one he had on the Mike Perry vs. Jake Paul undercard in July of 2024, when he fought a UFC fighter by the name of Uriah Hall, where we saw Chavez basically a shell of himself at 38, where he basically cruised himself to a unanimous decision victory. So with that bout, it was very unimpressive, I think, but I can't really say much about Jake because he fought a 58-year-old man in the name of Mike Tyson, which not impressive there either. So these two are not really coming off the most impressive fight, but Jake definitely could knock out Chavez Jr. It's definitely a major possibility, because especially in the last few years, Chavez has not been taking the sport seriously whatsoever and has been super undisciplined because he's been partying, he's been taking drugs, and just like I said, overall not taking the sport of boxing very seriously like he should be and living up to the legacy of his father. But of course, there is a way Chavez could still win this fight because he has more experience in the ring. He has better power, I think, but we'll talk about all of the ways he could win in the next video about when I talk about how he could win this fight. But honestly, all Jake needs to really do in this fight is one of two things: either cruise his way to a unanimous decision victory, because Chavez is on the older side. He is now 39, and in the sport of boxing, people who are over 39 don't really do good in the sport. And like I said earlier, it's not like Chavez's last performance has been golden or very impressive. You know, he just cruised his way to a unanimous decision against a UFC fighter, while Jake, on the other hand, has been knocking out UFC fighters like Tyrone Woodley, Ben Askren, and especially and most importantly, Anderson Silva, who Anderson Silva actually beat Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. a few years ago after his loss to Jake in the ring. So yeah, not too impressive, I'd say, but we'll just have to see what version of Chavez comes, because of course I could say that there's many versions of Chavez that could show up to this fight. There could be a super disciplined Chavez and he just goes in there and executes a perfect plan against Paul, because definitely when you see Paul fight, you see some openings that really you shouldn't see, and especially in recent training with Jake, you could definitely see his hands are down when he's throwing his jab or his cross or his hook, so he's definitely leaving himself open for counter punches. So this could possibly be the end of Jake, but it also could be the rise of Jake, because we all know our big thing with Jake is the fact that he's never fought an actual real boxer. Of course you could say, oh, Mike Tyson, well, he was 58 and a complete shell of himself. You could say Tommy Fury, but Tommy Fury almost lost. He won by only a few points because Tommy was also knocked down during the fight in the 8th and final round. You could say his fight against Ryan Borland, but he was retired as well and way out of his prime. You could say Andre August, a Golden Gloves champion. There was no excuse there, just a first round knockout, but there could be an excuse of just not being under the lights long enough, because definitely the crowd gets to you. But Chavez Jr. is no stranger. He has extreme experience in the ring, and this could definitely play well for him. But Jake has a huge advantage, which of course he does. He would never fight somebody who has all the advantages over him. Chavez is almost out of his prime at 39. He has had very unimpressive performances as of late, and of course his drug addiction. So of course it's not really that impressive if he knocks out Chavez. Of course it will say wonders on his record because he has a win over a Chavez, you know, but possibly Chavez's aggressive Mexican style could be the end of Paul, or Paul could work with that and destroy Chavez. Either way, you know, both fighters could win, but this is talking about how Jake could win, and it's just, there are only two ways. If he cruises a unanimous decision victory against Chavez, that's what I expect. I do not expect that Chavez will go down, because ultimately in Chavez's career, he's never been down ever, but he has put down some fighters in the past. And Jake, he's put down almost every fighter, but he couldn't even take down Iron Mike Tyson. So that guy was 58. I don't think he'll be able to actually get the knockout on Chavez, Chavez, but I could definitely see a unanimous decision victory for Paul because of Chavez's stamina, because of his age, and because of his drug addiction, because Chavez looked very, very fatigued in his last fight with Uriah Hall. So hopefully everything that Chavez's father was saying is true. He's working hard, he's dedicated, because at the press conference they did say that Chavez was very dedicated, but ultimately you need to be dedicated with all your fights, not just one specific one. But we'll really see how this pans out. In the way of Paul winning, I only see it one way, and that's him cruising a unanimous decision victory over Chavez Jr. You know, there will be no knockouts from Paul. I already know that, because Chavez is just too big, too bulky, and too tall, and has a reach advantage over Paul. So that's the only way Jake will actually beat Chavez Jr. But in my next video, I will be talking about some of the ways Chavez could actually beat Jake, because man, there's a lot of them, but we'll talk about that on the next video. But until then, this has been Punch Discussion. Thank you for watching. Take care.